So I was looking back over this document, and I was reminded that if you flip through it, page 1, page 2, if you go to page 3, what do you see there? Keywords: well-supported, unsupported, professions. So what this is telling you is it's giving you insights, again, just to bring home that idea of, all right, if your sun is functioning well, how are you going to function? You will be inspiring, ambitious, you'll have vitality, leadership, confidence, and generosity. If you tend to be arrogant, cruel, conceited, pompous, have aggression, then that's going to show an imbalanced sun. If you have the capacity for sympathy, receptivity, to be protective, to have a good memory, that's going to indicate a well-supported moon. If you're touchy, you worry too much, you've got emotional instability, moodiness, smothering, that's difficulty with the moon. How many of you had a mom that smothered you to death and she thought that's just the way a mother should be? Any of you have a mom like that? No? Okay. Or keywords for Mars: courage, energy, activity, initiative, fixer, logical. Unsupported Mars, or unsupported might not be the best word, it's just imbalanced. Arrogant, aggressive, headstrong, selfish, impulsive. Again, how many of you who know astrology meet someone who's strong and forceful and aggressive and headstrong, say they've got a strong Mars? No, they don't have a strong Mars. They've got an overactive Mars. So by looking at these keywords, again, what you can do is you can look through them and you can ask yourself, do I have courage? Do I have the capacity to take initiative? If you do, then you know your Mars is probably doing all right. Or do you lack the ability to take initiative? Does something present itself and it passes you by? Well, then you refer to the remedies for Mars to see what you need to be developing. Now let's move on. And if we look at, there's another page here that's very helpful. This evening, if you want, if you have some free time, although we'll go over it, in the middle you will see references to particular houses and what the planet may mean in that particular house or what it might represent. For example, the sun in the first house, body, personality, and health. If it's in the second house, the sun in the second house shows one's ability to maintain resources for the immediate family. If it's in the third house, it shows one's ability for courage, inspiration, and the intelligent use of skills. This is a really great handout. Yeah. You'd think I had never read it before. I have. You know, and if you keep going, then there's whole pages. For example, the sun, the soul of all, divine inspiration. I am part of this great thing and I can fulfill my part. It talks about professions. It talks about qualities, self-confidence, capacity to inspire others, ambition, fame, power, creativity. The body for the sun related to the heart, the eyes. It can give one thin hair. Objects related to the sun: gold, copper, lead, brass, jewels worn on the ear. Nature, fruit-bearing trees. So this is a wonderful document. Again, this is from one of the students from the astrological apprenticeship course. And this homework was from the Graha and Planets class. So the way it's set up is the very first class that you take is the signs. So we spend an entire 6 to 8 week period just going over the signs. Then the next class is the bhavas, or the houses. We spend an entire 6 to 8 weeks just looking at what the houses mean. And then what this came from was the final class in year 1, where we look at and go into detail about what the planets represent. So use this, read over this. This will give you a lot of good ideas. But now we want to move on to Jupiter. So Jupiter is considered to be a gentle planet. Jupiter is considered to be the best benefic or gentle planet. Jupiter wants to help everyone and everything to grow because it loves doing it. He loves doing it. When he sees someone who wants to learn something, he doesn't look at you and say, okay, well, how much are you going to pay for my class? He says, I would love to talk to you about this. And he'll just talk and talk and talk to you. Jupiter is considered to be a Brahmin, the priestly class. And remember, the Brahmin's role is not about money. It's not about getting more things. It's because that natural sense of education, teaching, sharing, growth flows through them. Jupiter is considered to be a masculine planet. Jupiter takes initiative to help people learn to grow. It's also sattvic. When we think about Jupiter, the joy that Jupiter represents. So we know, or we've talked briefly, in a sense, about a few of the houses. Well, if Jupiter is in the second house, which we know deals with wealth and resources, the person's going to find a lot of enjoyment managing resources. They might be a banker. They might be someone who manages the books for a corporation or does something with a nonprofit. Jupiter in the third house might really love their siblings or their peers or their brothers. That's a third house thing. Jupiter in the fourth house, they might really enjoy being home. That's a fourth house issue. They might enjoy working with women, with mothers. Fifth house, a Jupiter individual might love children or just simply being creative. Sixth house, being of service to others. That's all they want to do is be of service to others. Or they're interested in health and well-being and improving that. So wherever Jupiter is placed is going to show us where the person gets an innate sense of joy. An innate sense of joy. You know, we were having a discussion at the break. Someone was asking me, asking me about getting a session, and she said, I told her how I did it, you know, in regards to pre-recording, and there's kind of a long list of people to get a session. And she said, well, doesn't that sort of ruin, did you use the word intimacy, or is that the term you used? He said, don't you miss the intimacy of it, or don't you feel distant? Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, you said distant, I think. Disconnected. Yeah, and I came back and I said, I kind of love feeling disconnected. You know, and I remember seeing again a sign that said, some days all I want to do is actually be a missing person. Well, that's sort of like the story of my life. And that's because my Jupiter is in the 12th house, which is that far away, hidden place. No one can find you, along with my ascendant Lord, which is the representative of me. So when people are like, I want to get a session from you, I'm like, kind of would like to refer you to someone else. It's nothing personal at all. That's not where I get my joy out of. And Channing Ayers, those of you listening at home, Channing Ayers of Asheville Vedic Astrology, Channing at AshevilleVedicAstrology.com, she's not like that at all. She wants to talk to you about your stuff all day long because her Jupiter is situated for that to be the case, right? Also, Ryan Strong. Does Ryan have a website?
Yes.
What's his website?
Strongveda.
Strongveda.com. So strongveda.com. Go talk to him. These are all people. These are all people that want to talk to you.
I have Jupiter. That makes so much sense. I have Jupiter in my 12th house. And I'm exactly the same way.
Right.
Like, I just want to go, like, we've had numerous, like, outings after. And I'm like, I just want to go home and, like, be. But I guess in a way, you look at it, one can look at it as a negative thing. Like, do you feel like, do you push yourself to go outside of that? Or do you think you just kind of accept it? And
I just accept it because everyone has their role. Everyone has their place. Some people's place is to do that. You know, and that's a very good point because you want to not compare yourself to what other people do or say. Like, you know, I've had many people say to me, I remember one of the first conferences I went to. I walk in, people know who I am because they've watched my YouTube videos and things. And this woman walks up to me and she says, you know, you'd be a lot more popular if you smiled more. I said, well, I've got Saturn on the ascendant, so. Yeah. because you see, Saturn doesn't want to smile. You know, I like smiling, but 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 that's sort of, I like laughing too because of Jupiter and Mercury together. But you see, since Saturn's on my ascendant, that's my initial projection of who I am, right? Once I'm in a place where I know you and you know me, then the Mercury and the Jupiter comes out, right? But still, because of where that Jupiter is placed, I do better. I'm not that astrologer that wants to talk to someone all day long about their stuff. And that is my role. That has enabled me to be the teacher that I am, because most of my energy and attention goes to online teaching. The 12th house also deals with online stuff, like interacting with the world, and that's primarily how I work with people. You are like the first people I've probably actually seen in real life in probably about 8 months. Right? No, it's not all. It's, So that's what's important about Jupiter, is that if you can see where Jupiter is, then you actually understand where that person really finds happiness. So to try to find someone with Jupiter away and to pull them out into the world, that's like trying to take have you ever seen a hermit crab? Let's pull him out of his shell. How long do you think he's going to last? He's not. Right? He's not. You don't want to pull a hermit crab out of its shell. But there might be another individual that, there's different balances of things that you can find there. And that's why you need to appreciate and respect your own unique expression of who you are and make it work somehow. Make it work somehow. That's the important thing.
And obviously, no answer is simple unless you look at the chart, but you talked a little bit about how you have a lot of planets in the uppermost part, like 8 through 12. But if somebody has that, they also have like Jupiter in the 12th. Does that kind of override?
See, I have that.
Yeah.
I have Jupiter in the 12th, but all of my planets are in the visible thing. So I am a visible person. Yeah. Like people know who I am, but I don't actively go out and interact. Yeah. I remember walking around somewhere in Asheville and someone came up to me and said, "Hey, are you?" I'm like, "No." And they said, "Are you an astrologer?" I said, they said, "Are you Ryan?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Why are you asking?" It's that kind of thing. So you can have that situation where a person can be visible, but that doesn't mean they're actually actively out there being visible. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
And I guess just on the flip side, there's people that they have friends that they've met the same person. Person doesn't remember.
Right.
I guess that might be.
It could be a reverse of that. Yeah. So there are multiple layers of this. Yeah. And that's the important thing. But Jupiter is where you are going to find your what I would say your default happiness setting, like your default happiness setting. Mm-hmm. Because I do find joy being out and interacting with people after I finally force myself to do it. I don't still do it by choice, but I have learned to enjoy it. So you can learn to do things like that. All right. So Brahman is the priest class. Brahman is sattva. And again, Jupiter is the joy of what you would do if you weren't getting paid, if no one was praising you, if no one knew who you were, you would do this kind of stuff anyway. Okay. The things that I do that I am well known for now, I did for a good 10 years before anyone knew who I was. And I just enjoyed it. Like it was just what I did. So there are probably things like that in your life as well that you have that. And it's going to be obviously related to Jupiter. Jupiter is related to ether and fire. And here it says to burn away ignorance. Jupiter is all about knowledge. And Jupiter is not about the knowledge of how do I change the timing belt in my car. Jupiter is the knowledge of how does this fit into the bigger picture. So that is why you can look at a chart of someone who you look at it, and once you've studied astrology, you kind of put your head in your hands and think, my God, what am I going to say to this person? Because there's such difficulty there. You're like, I don't even know where to start. But then you see their Jupiter, of all things, is doing fantastic. What happens in that situation is they have had a hard life. But because their Jupiter is so good, they understand, they see that it fit into the bigger picture somehow. They see how it made sense. One astrologer I know, I've told this story before, he had a very difficult Saturn, a very difficult Mars, a very difficult, very, very difficult constellation, multiple planets in this one sign related to his family and his siblings. I think a few of his siblings actually committed suicide. And his father was he was a veteran and had a lot of trauma from that and alcoholism. And he had a childhood that you would not want, just to put it mildly. And when I saw that and we were talking, I was like, I wouldn't even know what to say to you with a chart like this. And he's like, Ryan, it's okay. He says, I am completely all right with this. He says, because the work he also does is he works with troubled youth. And he said, if I had not had these experiences, if I had not had this horrendous stellium of planets in this area of my chart, I would not have known how to work with these kids. And so that is an example of a good Jupiter with a difficult chart. That's a good life still. I mean, at the end of it, that is a good life. Imagine someone who has everything in the world provided for them. The good house, good money, loving people, healthy food, but their Jupiter is the one thing that's hurt. Do you think they appreciate any of that? Usually they don't. Usually they still think that something is missing, and that's because Jupiter represents that capacity to understand the bigger picture. Beyond your little you who thinks they're so important, Jupiter has a sense of there's something greater going on here. And that's why Jupiter represents faith and religion and philosophy. And the best religion, the best faith, the best philosophy is that which allows you to understand that everything is interconnected and that there is some kind of deeper purpose, direction, understanding, even if you can't understand it. Even if your little mind can't get it. That is the value of faith. Faith isn't, as we were having a discussion earlier, I'm going to pray for something and have faith that it's going to be given to me. That's not faith. That's just mental games. Faith is, I'm walking through this life and I'm doing my best. And I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or 20 years from now. I can try to imagine it, but I know that wherever I'm at, no matter how painful it is, or no matter how joyous it is, no matter what waves are coming my way, I'm going to handle it one way or another. Or something is going to flow through me and help me and bring the situation around at some point in time or another. That is faith, and that is what Jupiter is all about. So that is why, for anyone, developing their Jupiter, doing mantras to Ganesh, trying to contemplate what is the meaning of all of this, can allow you to come to a greater understanding of Jupiter. And that is why yoga practice is so important. I don't mean, again, just the postures. I mean the real stuff, the stuff where you're considering the yamas and niyamas, where you're learning to meditate, where you're learning to internalize your awareness, you're learning to exist in that state of samadhi or oneness. Because that state of samadhi or oneness is not, oh, I feel so good, everything makes so much sense. That it's not bliss like emotional bliss. It is a knowing of how everything fits. Do you know what I'm saying? Have you ever been on vacation or had a day where you didn't need anything? You just knew everything was right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you learn to turn your attention within, whether your body's going to live or die, whether you're healthy or not healthy, whether your Ayurveda worked or didn't, whether your spouse loves you or not, there's something that allows you to understand that this is a process that is much, much bigger than your own little needs and wants. That is Jupiter. That's why I've got Jupiter. You can't see it, but my screen, screen saver thing, it's just Jupiter. And I remember, I've told this story before, I'll tell it again. When I was in college, before I really got into astrology, it was my first year, and I was taking an astronomy class. And I've always loved the stars. I've always loved looking at the stars. If I could get a hold of a telescope, I like looking at things. But in this astronomy class, they had a giant telescope. And on that night, two of the planets that were visible were Saturn and Jupiter. Now, at this point in time, I didn't really have much of an interest in astrology. And I sort of probably thought it was complete crap. But I went and I looked in the telescope, and I saw Saturn first. And when I saw Saturn with the rings in the blackness of space, just out there in the emptiness, my heart sank. And I felt desolate. And I was like, man, life is hard. Like it's like I became aware of the immensity of meaninglessness. And the reason I'm telling you this is because at this point in time, I had not read about Saturn. I did not know that that was a potential energy that Saturn can provide in somebody's life. And I remember looking at Jupiter, and I remember seeing all the moons and how beautiful it was and thinking, whew, I just feel good. Like I feel uplifted. I feel expansive. And these are all qualities of Jupiter. So I tell you that only because this happened to me before I knew anything really about the planets. So the planets themselves represent some kind of harmonic of our own inner self. And Jupiter, how many moons does Jupiter have? Does anyone know that? How many?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. It's like in the 10, it's in like the, I think above, someone Google it. I think it's above,
really?
yeah, it's above 50. It's a lot of moons. And Jupiter is the planet of progeny, creativity, like procreating, right? And Jupiter has all these moons, and it is the moon in our moon that helps things grow. So you've got a planet with all these moons, helps to speak to that. Saturn is the planet of restriction. What is it surrounded by? Rings.
79.
79 moons. Jupiter has 79 moons. Let's see. 7 plus 9 is what? 16 plus what? 7. That's interesting. Let's think about that one. Where does Jupiter eventually lead? Anyway, so Jupiter is this planet of ether, of fire, to burn away this ignorance. Jupiter is moist, and moist is not wet, nor is it dry, which means it's probably about what you really want. It's the best possible situation. You want your garden slightly watered but not flooded. The dosha is kapha. Jupiter is the biggest planet of these planets that we're discussing in the sky, in your astrology chart. Jupiter's name is Guru. In Sanskrit name is Guru. So we know what a guru is, but guru also means heavy, right? That which like weighs us down. And one of the ways it's been described to me is that your guru, if you've got a good one, I mean one that's not trying to get stuff from you or make you think he's really fantastic, a guru is meant to anchor you on a path so you don't get lost. Like when Melissa was passing, she told me just how much that whole Kriya Yoga practice meant to her and how much her relationship to Mr. Davis, that was our Kriya Yoga teacher, meant to her throughout all of her life, because throughout all of the changes, it was that steadiness that he provided that allowed her to continue to walk upon her path. So it is the guru, a true guru, that allows you to be who you are, but also explore life, but always know that there is this anchor. There's always this heaviness, this inertia to kind of keep you in tune with all that is, right? That's the idea of Guru and Jupiter. The dosha is sweet. As I mentioned, Jupiter is one of the greatest benefics, meaning you will like Jupiter even if you don't like Jupiter. Jupiter is the person that at first you think, oh man, but then the more you get to know him, I just love this guy. I don't know why, he's annoying as shit, but Jesus, he's great. Like that can be a Jupiter, because Jupiter can be so optimistic that it bugs you. Yeah, it's like it's too much, but you can't help but to love him. Jupiter, like the moon, looks in all directions equally. So just like the moon, Jupiter has the capacity to see all possibilities and to relate to all possibilities. So the moon, as I mentioned, has no enemies, which means no one really is going to take the moon down, really. Jupiter is enemies with nobody, meaning no matter what, Jupiter wants you to thrive. Jupiter wants you to thrive. And that's why in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a statement that the yogi, or a person on their spiritual path, always is happy for the good fortune of everyone else. Like, no matter what, it says you will be happy for the good fortune of everyone else. Now, if you don't know how to do that, if you're still a little envious or jealous, well, how do you develop your Jupiter? You practice seeing people who are successful and happy, even if you're miserable and everything's going wrong, and you try to imagine a sense of, I'm so happy that they have something good in their life. right? That will also help to strengthen Jupiter. Now, flipping back through here, Jupiter deals with expansion, opportunity, understanding, optimism, enthusiasm, guidance, and creativity. That's the positive. So if you have problems with optimism, you just can't do it. Find a way. Make yourself do it. That will strengthen Jupiter. The reason the person has the strong Jupiter is because they spent their theoretical model of past lives developing optimism. I would say that that's probably true. I'm not saying it's going to be easy either. Extravagance, bigotry, indulgence, fanaticism, smugness. That is when Jupiter is difficult. And you know these people, the people that think they know and understand the bigger picture, but you can't, right? That sort of smugness, that fanaticism that they have the right religion or the right practice or the right way. Jupiter doesn't do that at all. Jupiter knows any religion is right that keeps you on track and keeps you in tune with the wholeness of life. It doesn't care what you call it, right? Bigotry. Again, Jupiter is very much related to lawyers, judges, ministers, people who have a tendency to be kind of in charge of our culture. And if we get a skewed Jupiter, what happens is things become dogmatic. So when Jupiter isn't doing so well, all that goodness, all of that knowledge gets turned and encrusted into dogma. And so if you want to know, this is always another hard thing to do as an astrologer. When I used to do a lot more sessions with people, and they would want to talk to me about their spiritual teacher. And I would look at their chart, and I would see the situation of Jupiter, and they're head over heels for this teacher. I'm looking at the chart, I'm like, what do I say? Do I tell them, hey, I think you might want to rethink that? Or do I let them figure it out for themselves? Because what happens if you are deeply in love with this, and by deeply in love, I don't mean like romantically. I mean, you are so enamored with the ideal of this teacher, and then someone comes along and says, yeah, they're really not all they're cracked up to be. How do you respond to that?
It's conflict.
Yeah, it's a conflict. And I remember one person in particular that wrote to me, and they told me about this Kriya Yoga teacher that they were studying with. And I looked at it, I was like, oh my God. And they were going on and on about it. And sure enough, I tried to come up with some kind of way to maybe intimate, pay a little more attention to how they treat people. Pay a little more attention to what the motivations might be. But I didn't go too far because I didn't want to disturb their mind. And sure enough, a year later, I get this email saying, I have just been authorized to teach Kriya Yoga. And the first time they talked to me was when they first learned Kriya Yoga. So a year later, I've been authorized to teach Kriya Yoga. Can you show me how to do it? I was like, I thought you had this wonderful spiritual teacher. Why did he authorize you to do this a year after you started learning? And somehow you don't know how to do it? So anyway, the point being, when you look at Jupiter in a person's chart, it really, really doesn't necessarily matter what the state of it is, as long as you can encourage them to develop it, right? So I've learned that no matter what, with Jupiter, it's going to be good. It just might be that some people already have their tank mostly full, whereas other people might have to put some gas in it. But no matter what, if you can spend time developing Jupiter, a lot of other things in your chart will tend to work better by grace alone, really. Let's look at the remedies, and then we'll take some questions if we have them. Okay, Jupiter. Studying sacred texts, educating others, listening to and reciting sacred sounds, outdoor sports, laughter, Rudraksha. Anybody wearing Rudraksha beads? No.
I have it.
Those little like seeds.
Yeah. Rudraksha beads, I didn't bring mine. Did I? No, I didn't bring mine either. Rudraksha beads are like little prayer beads that people have, little knobby, gnarly beads. But there's actually science to Rudraksha beads because you can get bigger ones that have certain numbers of facets in them, like they grow naturally that way, and each facet is related to a particular planet. So there's actually Rudraksha therapy, gardening, and charity. Listening to and reciting sacred sounds, sound healing is related to Jupiter. So things using like gongs or chanting Om or using sacred sounds, that is specific to Jupiter because Jupiter is related to the ether element. And sound travel, science would not say that, but from our metaphysical perspective, sound is carried through the ether. Remember that Jupiter also deals with the ability to get and give good counsel. And in order to get good counsel, what do you have to do? Listen. People who can listen. And by listen, I don't simply just mean hear with your ears. I mean, keep your internal mouth shut and see what's being said and actually think it through. And you will see this over and over again, probably in your own practice. When you meet someone that wants to see you for Ayurvedic practitioner, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, and they come in and they already know what's wrong. And you try to tell them, you try to explain to them, well, I read your pulse, or I see these symptoms, and we need to work in this way. No, I've been on the internet. I know what's wrong. They can't hear, they can't listen. So the first thing you have to do in situations like that is find a way to make them feel safe enough that they can listen. Because that is why people don't listen, is because they don't feel safe. They don't trust. And you'll take it personally, like they don't trust you, probably. I don't know. It depends on how egotistical you are. But most of the time, the reason people don't listen is because deep down inside, there is this fear and there's this great sense of control that they need to maintain. So they've got their own inner narrative that they want to bring to you, and they want you to validate that inner narrative. That's what happens usually. And think about it. If a person has a sense that all is in its right place and they are attuned to this greater understanding, how afraid are they going to be? They're not. And when you're not afraid, you can listen. Like when I go to a professional for whatever thing I'm not, an expert in, I know they're a professional. That's what they went to school for. I trust them. I usually check the reviews and these sorts of things. And when they tell me to do something, I do it because there is a sense of realizing that the information I need will likely be given to me. Now, let's say it's the wrong information. I listened to that. What have I learned in that instance? I've learned what not to do. And that is also valuable. That is also valuable. And there was a question that came up earlier about that. And, what I remember one of my friends, Ernst Wilhelm, who does the astrology software that I use, and he told me one time about a reading, I think a reading that he had done, and he's a fantastic astrologer. And he said, and I got that reading as wrong as you can possibly imagine. He said, and what happened was, he talked to this woman. She asked him about, I think, relationships. And he said, oh, don't worry. You're going to meet someone, around this month and this year. And she came back and said, you know what? I didn't meet anybody. I didn't meet anybody for 2 years. She said, but because you told me that, she's like, I didn't worry about it for that 1.5 year period. And I ended up going back to school and getting interested in my career and found out that, hey, I didn't even care about relationships anyway. Or not that she didn't care about it, but that the opportunity for her arose because she got the wrong information. And if you have a certain kind of trust in life, I realize it requires a lot of trust in life. And, I'm stressing that, and I hope you understand, having lost my wife and my house be destroyed and almost lost all my money, I'm not just talking out of my ass with this, okay? I'm not just coming at it from some, new age point of view. But when things like that happen and you're able to move through them, then that sense of Jupiter, that sense of faith grows in you. and you recognize what is true about you, and then Jupiter tends to work well in your chart. So this is why Jupiter is so important, because you're going to go through life with all the ups and downs, with the adversity that Mars brings and the challenges that make you stronger. You're going to have to endure things of Saturn. You're going to have the games that you need to play with Mercury. You know, people who don't want to play the game, they've got a bad Mercury. Oh, I don't want to sell out. That's what they all say. But what they mean is I don't want to play the game to actually be successful in what I need to do. Sometimes. I mean, it's not always true. But Jupiter allows you to put all of that into perspective. So any questions? We'll go around the room. We'll probably finish up with this because we only got about 10 minutes left.